So I actually made the transition into research and development while I was at Mars. And really because I was always interested in food.
He means the Mars, the food company, not Mars, the planet.
I thought aerospace, and I was like, this guy's been, that's amazing. That was going to be my next
Went straight
question.
to Mars. No.
Hello, Budri Gamarwara. Welcome to Startup 360 from the Gadigal Lands here in Sydney. I'm Simon Thomsen, editor of startupdaily.net.
I'm Majella Campbell, CEO of Fish Burners.
Great to have your company this week. I tell you, I am absolutely pumped. I was at Cicada by Tech23 this week. 23 amazing deep tech founders solving some pretty epic problems. I've brought the program, wonderful program they put together with all the details in it. It was just incredible. So many highlights. I have to say, Steve Kessel from Amazon was great. He was, one of the OGs and did some incredible builds and talked about that adventure. I'm going to try and get a story up on that one. But so many clever people who are going to be in the Startup Daily Best in Tech Awards in a couple of weeks. And we're going to speak to two of them today. Do you want to share who we're having a chat with?
We are meeting with Nick Hazell, the founder of Algenie.
Yes, who used to be the co-founder of V2, the plant-based meat company.
Absolutely.
Back for a second round.
Absolutely.
And he spent 2 years building this business, which is pretty incredible. I remember initially bumping into him at South by Southwest in 2023. And he said, I've got this idea. And he's kind of like, he did a little raise last year, about $1 million, and it's really stepping up now. He's got bioreactors over in Europe, and he is going great guns. But it's also just fascinating what he's doing and the way he's thinking about the next level of deep tech.
I'm really excited to talk to him. I know Nick from when he was a Fish Burners alumni, and he is just such an awesome guy.
One of your kids has grown up and got out in the big wide world.
Well, he's honestly awesome, so I'm so excited.
Totally epic. And our second guest, Ana from Terria.
Yeah. I'm excited. I'm learning all about digital twins these days, and I'm finding out more and more. I initially thought it was just like when you clone yourself, so I'm glad to see that I've expanded my understanding.
Yeah, it's not the avatar that just talks back to you and tells you how fabulous you are. This is about infrastructure.
I'm really keeping up with things.
Yeah,
but I'm super excited to learn from her all about Terria and what it's all about.
And incredibly, she was part of the CSIRO team who built the idea from scratch. They were the first one to put it in the market. There's a few different startups around working in this space for different applications, but interested in having a talk to her. Speaking of big deep tech news this week, $1.5 billion for PsiQuantum. Of course, that's a cohort of, I think, 4 Australian expat professors who put this business together. You may know it from the Queensland and Australian governments, pouring $940 million in funding and lending into the business. They're building their first quantum computer up in Brisbane by 2027. The business, I think the last time it did a round, which was a Series D a couple of years ago, 2021, was worth about $3.15 billion. Now it's worth $7 billion. So it's more than doubled in value. That's around 10.5 billion Australian. And Blackbird is in there. Blackbird invested in 2021. It's come in on this round as well. Some pretty heavy hitters in there, but we're talking big bucks. If you think about it, $1.5 billion is bigger than any actual VC fund we've raised in this country. It's extraordinary.
Crazy money. What would you do with $1.1 billion, Simon?
I probably wouldn't try and build a quantum computer, but I would invest in lots of people doing that sort of thing. And I have to say, after yesterday, I would be going, you get $1 million, you get $1 million, you get $1 million to everyone that was in that room, because there were so many incredible companies there. I think one of the personal favourites was Clayton, who is building these incredible EV retrofitting into mining equipment. So big, 200-ton trucks. He's doing this, and he was a hoot. He was an absolute. I had a bit of a chat with him. He's going to be at the awards in a couple of weeks, so that's pretty exciting. His company is EPCA, and so that was a really cool fireside chat with Sian from Cicada, and it was great to see Sam Ringwald from Conroy. He told an amazing story about how the competitors busted in and basically nicked everything. They followed the workers home, took their laptops, they took a whole lot of paperwork. It's like, it was really interesting to hear from a couple of founders who talked about how bigger established competition kind of goes to great lengths to stop and prevent the innovation.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But it was such an inspiring day. Could I just say that picture there, if you can see that, that's bright sunshine. That was 2024. It was pissing down rain all day, but that was great because we were inside hearing great ideas. So that was fun.
That was great.
Yep. Got to get you along next year.
Yeah, next year I'll be there.
You'll be so inspired. Before we go any further, I do want to say that Startup 360 is supported by Vanta, helping startups unlock market opportunities through automated compliance. Thanks to Vanta and the team. Well, anything else? Any big news in your life?
None on my side.
All right,
Maybe coming soon.
Well, let's just get Nick in here and have a chat. We'll be right back to talk with Nick Hazell from Algenie.
Welcome back to Startup 360. We are joined with the amazing Nick Hazell from Algenie. Welcome, Nick.
Oh, it's nice to be here.
And fresh from Tech23.
Yeah.
Not so fresh, but I'm certainly back.
It was a great day, though, wasn't it? And sort of 23 amazing founders, including yourself. What did you get out of the day?
It's just great to be with in that sort of environment because you've got everybody there. There's investors there. There's some really quite inspirational startups which I learn heaps from, and there's a kind of a buzz. So it's quite exhausting, but you actually get energy from that. And I just come off a flight from Europe, so I was severely jet lagged, but it was like full on all the time. We're demonstrating the technology, getting feedback, and I mean, dare I say it, it kind of felt positive for the first time in quite a while. The last couple of years have been quite tough, and it felt that there was a sort of like, yeah, we've got this thing's going to happen. So that was a pretty nice feeling to come away with.
Wow.
Well, should we go into, first of all, tell us what you're up to now, because it's a bit of a departure from plant-based meat.
Yeah, but it's kind of related. I mean, so Algenie is a startup. Our mission is to solve what we saw as the problem of algae biotech, which is cost. Now, algae biotech, most people wouldn't even think of algae as a biotech industry because it's actually pretty small. It's a couple of billion in value in total, whereas yeast and bacterial biotech you measure in hundreds of billions. But the reason is because algae is quite expensive to grow, and the link with my previous startup, which was V2 Food, was that we developed a color for coloring the plant-based meat, which was an algae-based pigment, and patented it. And if you can remember the days of Impossible, 5 or 6 years ago, and the hype around the heme and the color, well, we'd patented the other way of getting a color change. It's quite important for some of the flavor chemistry. It's a bit complex, but basically we had the other heme, which made us quite valuable. The trouble was the cost of growing algae was so expensive, I couldn't afford to put the pigment into the product. And that actually got me down the journey of understanding, well, why is algae so expensive to grow? What are the levers you can pull? And we kind of solved it for V2 Food, and working with a company that was producing photobioreactors. So we solved some of the things that were driving the cost up, and they also worked with UTS, who did the biology. And so when I left V2, I had in my head a pretty good knowledge of what the levers are for the cost of growing algae and where the limits were. And the limits are actually in the sort of the geometry of these photobioreactors, either these big ponds, if you like, or the tubular sort of systems that you can buy, or even you've got other like tanks that you dangle lights in. And they all have big geometry problems because basically the algae don't get enough light. And the other thing that's a problem is they have huge capital cost problems. So those were the two problems that we needed to solve. And that was the beginning of the Algenie journey, trying to figure out how to solve those problems. And that's what we believe we've done. And
but
that's
this
what
is
we're
something
starting
different,
up.
isn't it? Because I have an algae biotech, but I just call it my pool at the end of winter.
Algae likes to grow, and it grows very fast when
Yeah.
you give it the right conditions. So you're obviously giving algae good conditions to grow. So
if you need any
so
tips,
shame on you.
Yeah. But just explain this for people who are trying to get their head around it, and also the idea that algae is a bad thing. Where does it fit in the food chain?
Well, algae is like anything. It's neither good nor bad. It's a range of species of organism. And I say algae, it's actually algae and cyanobacteria. And biologists would be very clear about the distinction, but you and me, it's that stuff that makes your pool go green or blooms in the oceans. And algae can produce a huge amount of chemistry. There's millions of species of algae, apparently. I think there's only 500 that have been characterized. Quite how the biologists know that there are millions when they've only characterized 500, I'm not totally sure. But anyway, I think there's some genetic data that they use. And algae can produce the wealth of biochemistry that you can produce with all living material. It's incredibly diverse. And the way I kind of look at it is that, well, if you think about our sort of chemical system, like we make a lot of chemistry. We make most of it out of gas and oil, crude oil. The precursors for all of that is basically oil, which is really old algae. Well, it is. It's old algae. And obviously that is the basis for our industrial system. So there's no chemical reason why it couldn't be the base for our new industrial system. But you're not going to do that unless it's cheaper than oil. But if you could do that, and that's our mission here, then you could sort of rewrite the whole industrial economy based on something which is sustainable. Because when you grow a kilo of algae, you suck up 2 kilos of CO2. Oh. And that's interesting because I mean, the way I look at the climate change problem, very simply as an engineer, there's 1,000 gigatons of CO2 in the atmosphere more than when we started burning fossil fuels. And that's climate change. And the only way to stop climate change is to take 1,000 gigatons of CO2 and stick them back in the ground or stick them into something that isn't up in the air. And that doesn't mean sticking them in the ocean either, because the ocean's already acidified. So what do we do at a gigaton scale?
Because I think when you pictured it yesterday, it sounded like, you're trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon. If we're putting 1,000 tons in the ground and thinking, well done, everyone.
It frustrates the hell out of me. And look, and it shouldn't, because I think it's like you can kind of say, well, everyone has got to do their bit. My carbon footprint is, I don't know, I just flew back from Europe, so it's probably maybe, I don't know what it is, but I should look after my carbon footprint.
Didn't you click on the button for $5 of extra on your ticket?
Isn't that crazy? And I did, and I know it doesn't do anything really, but I do it anyway because I feel guilty.
Yeah.
So everyone has got a contribution to make, but the size of the problem is not 1,000 tons; it's 1,000 tons. So I get very frustrated when we sort of are jubilant at things that are maybe 1 million tons or whatever, because the problem is a million ton problem. And we're not really talking about projects and ambition that is anywhere near big enough. When I went on gardening leave from V2, I used the time and the freedom I had for those 6 months to travel around a little bit and go to some conferences and understand what was happening in climate change. And I went to a conference in Rotterdam, which was about carbon sequestration. And it was the biggest projects in the world, basically pumping CO2 from cement works and from industrial CO2 from the Europort, pumping it into these big gas wells, these emptied gas wells sort of off the coast of Holland. And the biggest project, they were talking about the biggest project in the world at the time, by 2032 might take out 1 million tons of CO2. And the room was jubilant. And I'm thinking, well, okay, that's the first million. What about the other million? It's like we're 6 orders of magnitude away from solving the problem. And that was seen as the biggest project in the world for sequestering CO2.
And I can imagine that we probably would have grown by 20 million or more at that point in time.
Well,
anyway.
yeah, I mean, every year, what's the Bill Gates number? Was it 50 gigatons we're putting into the atmosphere every year? Anyway, okay. So that 1,000 gigatons of CO2 is becoming 1,050 and then 1,100. And I'm going to have to revise my slides because I did put 1,000 But now it's 1,100.
Anyway, so we kind of went to optimism. I took it down a little bit quite quickly.
Raising my blood pressure.
Your turn.
So, Nick, you're an engineer by trade. I mean, it's obviously, I love when we bring engineers onto the show as well, because it's just interesting. Well, I want to tap in, I guess, that journey from being an engineer to becoming a startup founder, that process of evolving your skills into growing a business, and particularly in the climate tech space, because that's been something that you've been following, I guess, between both of those two.
Yeah, it's a very non-traditional career. So I started as an engineer in aerospace, and then I got into food, starting in manufacturing, and then into R&D. So I actually made the transition into research and development while I was at Mars. And really because I was always interested in food.
He
and
means
also,
the Mars, the food company, not Mars, the planet.
I thought aerospace, and I was like, that's amazing. That was going to be my next question.
Went straight to Mars. No, we might have to wait a few years for that. No, this is Mars, the food company. I went to there because of my love of chocolate, which I made, and got into R&D. And that sort of, I mean, engineers are basically kind of scientifically trained mathematicians who like solving problems. That's kind of what an engineer is. And so we kind of bridge the science. So I got really into food chemistry and food science. I led sort of some of the research for food science for Mars, and then moved to Australia via Holland. So I first worked in Holland with Mars, then moved to Australia, was R&D director for Master Foods, and then for PepsiCo, and then doing lots and lots of innovation. And then I got, and a lot of that was working with scientists. So the idea of translating science into useful things is kind of what you do as an R&D director. And so I was getting trained on the job, if you like, with these big corporations. But getting into startup territory was complete good luck that I was made redundant by PepsiCo. Just after they'd awarded me the chairman's award for solving some of their big nutrition problems, reducing the amount of sodium in their products. They relocated R&D sort of back to Plano in Texas, and I was out of a job, which meant that I could start working with the CSIRO and consulting and teaching innovation, and then doing a project ultimately for the CSIRO in the plant-based meat space. And that was the beginning of V2 Food. They asked me if I would do a project to investigate the area. Is it interesting to do plant-based meat for CSIRO? I obviously concluded that they had some cool technology, and that was the beginning of V2 Food. So very unusual for someone to go from being an entrepreneur, trying to do innovation in big corporations, to being an entrepreneur, and really not on my game plan at all, but it just so happened. And now I must have loved it so much that I'm doing a second one.
It's I have to say a little bit different for you, because it feels like this one is much more intimate. The V2 thing was a time where almost like plant-based proteins were kind of like the AI of the time.
Yeah,
and climate tech was the trend.
Rushing for it. You had a billionaire and Jack Cowan as a part of it. You of course had Main Sequence and Phil backing you. It kind of felt like it was a big production, big moment, and there were big ambitions and big dreams. Take us a little bit through getting on that wave at the time.
Yeah, and of course, I didn't know it at the time. I mean, now I have 20/20 hindsight. I thought I was really good at pitching. That was why we could raise so much money, but it wasn't. It was because exactly we were in a zeitgeist where plant-based meat was the biggest thing. Everyone believed that people's diets would change, with this amazing products that Impossible were creating, and then V2, that people would switch automatically from eating meat to eating something that tasted as good and was the equivalent, etc. And that's what we believed as well. It didn't quite pan out that way, but I don't believe that actually the mission and the vision is wrong. I think that's ultimately that's where it's going to go. And the products that will win will be the ones that can match and beat the price of meat, because let's face it, plant-based meat should be cheaper than meat. It's a lot more efficient than using an animal to grow your meat. But it has to be more delicious. And one thing I've learned in the food industry is that it's taste. That's it. It's almost, you bring it down. If it doesn't taste good, there is no product on this planet that works with consumers if it doesn't taste good. Now, you could argue the merits of Vegemite versus Marmite, and that's a cultural thing. But essentially, you get a reward for eating, and that's taste. So plant-based meat has to taste better than animal meat, and I think it's pretty much there now from a technical perspective. And then what will happen is that the costs will come down, and you're already seeing that. I mean, I'm not associated with V2 anymore, but I know some of what they're doing, and in some markets, you can see that plant-based is going to take over from animal meat.
I want to maybe tap into that before you were talking about that gap that you took, or that 6-month gardening leave, and I guess the time in between your two startups and when you're finishing up at V2 and moving on to algae. Like, I guess that generally that experience between founders can be a little bit jarring, going so hard and then stopping.
Yeah.
What was that experience like for you? And did you know you were going straight into Algenie afterwards?
No, I didn't. I didn't know what to do. I mean, it was a bit of a shock. It was a shock. I kind of smooth over it that this is a natural, transition. And of course I wanted, but no, it was quite traumatic. But I did have in the back of my brain this idea that there was something more that needed to be done in the algae space. And I spent quite a lot of time with UTS and understanding more and more about the constraints there. And then I had an idea. Mm-hmm. And the trouble is that I had an idea that maybe there's a way of solving the light problem, the cost problem with this thing that we've invented called this helical photobioreactor. And then, of course, as you know, I started doing the calculations and then started to talk to biologists about what could this look like. And then I started sort of mapping out what the costs could be, because I knew in my mind, I knew what the target was right from the very start. Algae is only going to be huge and make any difference if it's going to be sort of approaching the cost of crude oil. So, I worked out at the time the cost of crude oil, at the time it was $80 US a barrel. So that's about $1 Australian a kilo. That's the target. Can we grow algae at $1 a kilo? And then I started calculating how could we make the helix, what would be the technologies to do it, how cheap could we make the equipment, and then how much productivity could we get. And I got pretty close. Didn't quite get there, but got pretty close. And then I was just thinking, well, I've got to do this. And after quite a few sleepless nights, just thinking, do I really want to have the pain of doing a startup again? It was just clear to me that I had no choice. It was either that or pickleball. Pickleball's great,
Champion.
but it's not quite as satisfying as doing a startup. So we started. And to your question, it was a very different environment than 5 years ago with plant-based meat. Investors were not crowding in. First of all, the environment's different in general. 5 years ago, there was a lot of venture capital looking for things to invest in. 2 years ago, really looking for excuses not to invest in anything. And the other thing is algae is really not sexy. It's, as soon as I say, well, I'm going to do an algae biotech, you could see them looking for the exits. It's like, well, why would you do that? It's a failed category. ExxonMobil, they invested hundreds of millions of dollars in SAF, in biofuels, and they wound it up. It's a failure. And I'm thinking, well, why was it a failure? And I think it's pretty clear the reason why algae didn't take off was because the cost of it always was 10 times more than the fossil fuel equivalent. So why would anybody buy it? You're not going to pay 10 times as much to save the planet. And I think that message is beginning to be understood. So if we can have really strong proof points that we can get to those sorts of numbers, then I think people are beginning to realize that this could actually be something that could be quite big.
So you talk about that transformative aspect, and it was great to be reminded of what had happened before, because I think most people, their initial reaction is, wait, what? This is important. Why? Whereas in the plant-based thing, I think everyone looked at impossible and thought, yeah, give me some more impossible. This one, there's an educative aspect to getting people into it. Once it does start to make sense, what's the reaction like then? And in this context, what are the skills you picked up from round one that you take into round two, especially when you are talking to investors and collaborators and everyone who you want to get on board with this journey?
Yeah, I mean, round one, and you said it right. You know, we had a customer. So Hungry Jack's was there as a customer right from the start. So the biggest fear, I guess, from an investment perspective is that, you know, you're some geek chasing a technology and you're not interested in making money and finding a customer. And that was a big tick even before I started, because if we could make the product, there was a key customer. And with algae, what we're doing is we're creating a technology, and there are lots of people that will grow algae for lots of different verticals. So we were very unclear as to who our customer was. And that sort of confusion is not very helpful when you're trying to raise money. So I think now we're a little bit clear about who the first customers are going to be. We have a very clear seeding strategy, because there are lots and lots of verticals that we can tackle, but none of those verticals are solved just by growing algae. It's actually, you've got to grow algae, and then you've got to harvest it, and then you've got to do loads of downstream processing to create some valuable chemistry. So in a way, the easy bit's growing the algae, the hard bit is all the downstream processing. So that has to occur, and that takes time, which again is not very attractive from a venture capital perspective. So what we've done is we've started selling. So we sold our first photobioreactor a few days ago to a university in France. But we're also talking to the live aqua feed. So this is algae for oysters and for mussels and for juvenile fish. Big industry. And the good news is that you don't need to do harvesting and downstream processing, because actually what they want is just live algae. And that's a lot quicker for us to establish a sort of beachhead. And it's a big industry. And so we can go there. We're not going to be defined, you know, Algenie is the fish feed company, but it's a good way to get started and to get traction and to get sales and to get revenue. And that's, you know, end of the day, we're trying to save the planet, but job one is to be a business that makes money first, because otherwise you won't do job two. So that's a way of getting the traction, which we really didn't have in the first years of Algenie. And we had that kind of laid on a plate with V2 Food. And the other is to start talking now about the size of the opportunity. I didn't need to do that with V2 Food, because Impossible had already done that. They'd already sort of laid down the path. Everyone believed it, investors believed it, and it was just, all we had to do is say, hey, we're the same but better, and demonstrate that, and then the investment would come. Here we have to lay down the path. There isn't a path ahead of us. In fact, actually, investors are looking the other way, and we have to say, hey, hang on a minute, look here, this is a path forward, and this could be a really, really big industry which could have global significance. So mapping out that vision in a credible way is, I kind of learned a bit of it with V2. I think I've got a lot to learn. But we're beginning to say the right things, I think, and people are beginning to believe that, yes, this could be quite big.
Looking back on both of your journeys through V2 and Algenie, I'm interested to know what has been the most useful or beneficial startup support that you've received. Where are you sort of directing yourself to first off the bat with Algenie?
Yeah, I mean, there are parallels. I mean, with V2, we had CSIRO as our sort of technology provider, and I would be doing lots of projects with CSIRO, and we would pay the money, and we had an agreement that we would own the IP and CSIRO would do the work, and I felt totally supported. You know, any technical problem I had, I would think about it. I'd talk to some scientists. If I didn't have the right scientists, they'd find someone else in CSIRO. There's always someone in CSIRO that can solve your problem. And so that was a real reassurance that they had my back technically. With Algenie, it's slightly different, but I'm working with UTS, and certainly in the algae space, there's some quite brilliant scientists at UTS, and so I feel that we're pushing the boundaries of what's possible here. But I've got some scientists that are reassuring me that I'm not saying things that are so outrageous that they can't be true. We will be able to figure it out, and I think that this. I don't know if it's a model, but the idea of having an entrepreneur and a startup working with a science organization and then sort of pulling the value from the science and putting it into a product or into a business. If we're successful with this one, then is that a way of doing it? Because I know CSIRO and all the universities, that they share the frustration that they have such great deep science that's not having any impact. It's not going anywhere. And in a way, the Australian problem is that. I mean, a lot of people have talked to it, that, Australia are right up the top of the league in terms of the science we produce in the universities, and we're right down at the bottom. I don't know, Guatemala is beating us or something in our ability to impact from the science. So somewhere that translation from universities into impact has got to be solved, and maybe there's a way through startups and entrepreneurs to do that. Because
do we flip the model there? Because in this instance, you started with a premise that you've then taken back to the scientists, and often the science gets to a point where it's like, this could be useful. Does anyone know what to do next? And Larry Marshall's talked about this for a long time. That commercialization journey has been the really hard part, especially, and again, CSIRO's done a great job with something like On Accelerate to turn people who are not naturally entrepreneurs and not startup founders into something more like that, to figure out where the next step goes in the idea.
Yeah, I think it's a tough ask, actually, to turn a scientist who's a career scientist into an entrepreneur. I think it's pretty tough. I think the sorts of characteristics that make you want to pursue a career in academia are kind of the antithesis of the characteristics that make a good entrepreneur. So I don't think the solution is we're going to have to turn our professors into entrepreneurs, because I there may be 1% that could do it, but they're not the right people. I think that it's the people who can bridge the gap between the science and the commercial. I'm not a scientist, I'm an engineer, but I can kind of get away with it. I've gotten away with it for 20 years as an R&D director, and people think I'm a scientist, but I'm not. I think like an engineer, but I can understand the language of science. And I think actually there is merit in having that tension. Scientists are not terribly concerned whether what they're doing is useful or not. An engineer on its own, just doing stuff that's practical, is not unlikely to get to a breakthrough. But the two together are much more likely to come up with something. And I'm a big believer when it comes to innovation, of having different voices in the room, sort of looking at the same problem from different angles and solving it together. And that I think is probably the way forward. So I'm not saying it can't be done, turning sort of scientists into entrepreneurs, but I think that there's merit in finding the people who are the entrepreneurs and getting them involved in the science.
It's a completely different angle, right? Because like the commercialization side of it is basically the opposite of what you would normally advise for a person starting a startup. Usually like you find a problem, build the solution, whereas this one you've kind of got technology first and you're building it. So it makes sense. That's completely different.
I've spent my entire career as a journalist avoiding being in management, because it's a different set of skills and it's not the bit that I love. I stay in my lane, because that's the best part of the job, having this sort of thing, rather than doing another board pack and another bloody spreadsheet.
Yeah. I just viscerally reacted to that.
I know.
I think you did too.
Well, I'm the same, and okay, I'm the CEO of Algenie, but I don't really act like a CEO in the sense that I'm really not that. I'm really motivated at solving the problem, which is sort of closer to the R&D director. But that's okay, actually, in a deep tech startup. That's what you want. Do you want that person running a multinational business? No, you don't want. I should not be given a multinational business to run. I probably had a chance to be general manager in some functions in PepsiCo and Mars, and I really did avoid it, because I know that that's not me. It gives me stress and no joy, and you don't want to have a career that's just stress and no joy.
No.
All right. I'm going to finish with this, Nick, because from your time at Mars and working in fast-moving consumer goods, you would have come across the bliss point, that wonderful, naughty combination of sort of a flavour that is also sort of fat, sugar and salt. What's your bliss point at this point in your career and life?
Oh, goodness me. What a difficult question. I mean, look, the excitement of having an idea that is so compelling and then you're doing some more calculations, and no, it's not wrong, and then you do some more calculations, and you think, well, maybe this is it, and then you go and talk to people, and then it is. Someone said to me right at the early stage of my career, when I actually moved from manufacturing and engineering into R&D, and it was a guy who was an inspiration to me. He's still around. He ended up as the head of R&D for Mars globally. A guy called Ralph Jerome, and he sort of guided my journey into R&D because he could see that I thought like somebody who was a R&D guy. And he said, you know what? It's about the idea. If there's an idea that has such strength and such magic and such power that it consumes you, then you should go with it. And he wrote me a letter saying that. I've still got it. And that is actually the bliss point for when you're innovating. It's an idea that you can see that it actually is an idea, and it has merit and it has value, and it could really be the solution to a big problem that's worth solving. It's quite a joyful thing, and it's not like a light bulb moment. I don't think they exist, but it's something that builds. And because I have thousands of ideas, but then every now and again one doesn't die, and the more you question it, the more compelling it becomes, and that's actually quite. I wouldn't say it's blissful, but that's a huge amount of joy. And then it becomes worthwhile devoting a lot of your time and your energy to making it happen. And I've had a few of those in my career, and that's probably as close to bliss as you can get in a job.
Well, Nick, we hope it brings you more bliss, and we wish you all the best with Algenie. Hopefully there is a large check coming down the track soon for the next stage. I remember you raised 1.1 mil last year, and UTS is part of the team backing you. But this is such an exciting project. Great to see you on stage at Tech23 yesterday as well.
Yeah, it was great to talk to you. That was really good fun.
Thanks for your time. All right, we'll be right back, and we're going to meet Ana and talk about digital twins. Don't go away. Welcome back to Startup 360, and I kind of feel like it's a special edition with the Tech23 cohort. As I mentioned earlier, this week, the Cicada Innovations did the Tech23 program, 23 extraordinary deep tech founders telling their stories. And we have another one, Ana Belgun from Terria. Welcome to Startup 360 and 10X. We're going to fire 10 questions at you in a minute. But first of all, tell us a little bit about what you're doing. It's been an extraordinary 11-year journey.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. As I said before, I haven't done this before, so
first
bear
time for
with me.
everything, even a digital twin.
Yes, and first time for Tech23. Well, my name is Ana, and I'm a co-founder of Terria, which is a startup that has spun out of CSIRO, so the CSIRO research organization, last year, exactly 1 year ago, actually, and we have had a ride since then. We started in CSIRO 10 years ago with a couple of engineers and a product person, and we pioneered digital twins in Australia back in 2018 with some of our collaborators in government, back then in New South Wales. A digital twin, for people who don't know or haven't heard this concept before, in spatial or in geospatial, it means that you are creating a virtual reality copy of what exists, outside your window, and you have to bring in 3 key ingredients, and one of them is you have to bring in a natural environment, either in a 2D or 3D manner, the built environment, so everything from underground infrastructure to above ground infrastructure like buildings and bridges and so on. And the last element that makes it a digital twin is real time, because you have to look at these elements over time to understand the changes that urban landscape suffers. So that's a digital twin in a nutshell.
I think we made a joke that it was a little bit like SimCity. It's the sophisticated version of SimCity.
Yeah. That's what I used yesterday when we were talking about it, because instead of me saying all these words, if you say SimCity and if people have played it, like straight away they get it.
I spent so many hours on Sims. I'm fully familiar.
There you go. This is the inventor. This is
I'm ready. I'm sold.
the practical one rather than just the game. How's it been that sort of first year of being a startup founder? We were talking about it with Nick a little earlier. It's a different experience to come from that science engineering background into this space.
Amazing.
Yeah?
Amazing. I tell everyone that asks me this question, because we came from a research organization, because, you had a secure job and, a normal job, coming into the startup wild world. Everybody's asking, like, are you okay? Is everything okay? I can't say how happy we are, because we sped up everything from development to making decisions about everyday business decisions to engaging to absolutely everything. And I love every minute of it, and can't go to work every day. So yeah, it's been incredible. And we've released, a new online presence last year, a new user interface, and last week we've released a new version of our product, a SaaS version, and yeah, we have many other things in plan this year and next year. So yeah, amazing. Recommend.
Cool. All right, now you ready to do this? The way this works, it's 10 rapid fire questions. Majella asked the really insightful, clever ones. I asked the really dumb ones.
No pressure.
Take it away.
Actually, just speaking to what you were talking about, how has your mindset shifted from when you moved from a research environment to running a startup with commercial stakes?
I couldn't be happier. This is exactly what we wanted to do for many years, because it's like we found our home. Because in our case, it was a bit different than a traditional research team. We were an engineering and product team, and we have worked with customers in real life for many years. So we knew how we were functioning like a commercial kind of arm of engineering and design in DA 61. And, starting up as a company was very natural to us, and we found our pathway. So, yeah.
What is the use of a digital twin?
Yeah.
Why bother?
Good question. Well, the ultimate goal of a digital twin, an urban digital twin, is to realize, make decision making easier in the future by running simulations and what if scenarios. What if the rain will be more than 25 mil today, for example? What will happen with transport? What will happen with electricity, population movements, etc., you name it. That's the end goal, and that's the vision of a digital twin. Exactly like in SimCity. It's a game, right? SimCity is a game, and you play it. And the role of the player is to essentially manipulate resources and realize different scenarios of, growth of population, what's the impact on resources, what's the impact on transport, and make decisions about designing that city. So imagine doing that in a few years in real life. So we are not there yet. Mm-hmm. We have laid the foundations of data coming in flowing from different systems into this digital twin, and moving on to use those data sets and information for creating the what if scenarios. That's the end game.
Being a startup founder means you're realizing a big vision with very limited resources. What's been the hardest call you've had to make as CEO of the company?
So far? Not being very careful with resources, very careful, and always agonizing about, am I spending enough to get the resources to move fast enough, versus, not spending as fast as I want or we want to, burn out the cash before we, to survive. Essentially, that always balancing survival with speed. So that's where, Main Sequence Ventures seed round helped very much to realize that, as much as that speed, And we are preparing for a Series A, again, to move fast. Because you can move without funding, but the speed is not the same. And you're missing opportunities, essentially.
Tell me, what's the thing that people misunderstand about a deep tech startup?
Misunderstand that...
It's a space, we were talking about it the other day, it's not B2B software as a service. It's a bunch of very big problems that can have a very profound effect on our lives rather than being able to fill in some sort of workplace document faster.
Yeah, maybe we are not the best place to answer that question because we are a B2B SaaS. But from what I observed, when people come into this space to invest, they do know it takes longer, right? It's a bigger bet, longer bet. So you have to, when you come in, if you don't have the patience as a founder and as an investor and as government to actually see this through in 10, 15, 20 years, then you shouldn't do it, right? So the expectation of coming into a deep tech kind of environment, investing and expecting returns very quickly is not gonna, it's not gonna happen, right? Unless you're very lucky, obviously. So very, very careful understanding of what does it mean for deep tech to realize investor returns. And the second one is, I've seen a lot of disconnect between deep tech and product and brand. They are not disconnected, and they shouldn't be disconnected. If you want to realize success for a deep tech company, you do have to have a really good product mindset and go to market and brand. And brand, not just, lipstick on a pig, is just real understanding the power of a brand locally and internationally, because that will feed your sales, and that will feed your science, and that will feed getting the product out there as a product. So I wish there's more understanding around product and what it means for any research.
Open source is at the core of Terria's approach. Can you talk us through the mindset behind that and that choice? Because it's quite unusual for the deep tech industry.
It was very easy for us because when we started 10 years ago in CSIRO, in NICTA at that time, we started with a problem. And the problem was the government came to NICTA, National ICT Australia, which was merged with DA61 later on, with the problem of having a lot of geospatial data invested in and not being available to the public or industry companies to use it. So they wanted something that was agnostic from a technology perspective, and they wanted that it had the definition of the problem had very simple, basic principles of open by default, open data should be open, all levels of government bringing their data together on one platform. And the team at that time was led by Bill Simpson-Young, our manager, and he was amazing and very, open-minded guy. And it was a natural choice to realize return on investment for government to make it open source and we were built on open source. We use open source from others. There's no secret in that, and that's how industry looks today. It's powered by open source by default. And we continued with that approach, and it proved to be successful because now Terria open source part of it is translated in 26 languages, and that brings CSIRO tech into the world and having more impact than just one project, one product.
Wow.
Open, no secret source. Tell me, Ana, if you could kill any regular meeting, what would it be and why?
If we could kill any regular meeting.
Yeah, don't have to hold the meeting anymore.
We killed meetings on Wednesdays, so we don't have it. We don't have any meetings. And we've killed a lot of meetings along the way. We kept only the ones that bring value to everyone, especially because we are remote. Since forever, we've been remote. since before COVID. So we need time to sink in as a team. So I wouldn't kill any meeting in our team right now.
Well, you've done it, but what was the thinking behind Wednesday?
So when you work with makers, like, you have the managers that, don't do much, and you have the makers, the engineers, the designers, the people who actually do stuff, right? And they need deep thinking and focus. And you can't constantly, just to suit your schedule of a manager, you can't just keep interrupting them with, I want to talk about this and I want to talk about that. If they want to talk about something, they will, get to it. But we wanted a day where there are no interruptions and they can focus on things, including myself. If I want to write something and I don't use ChatGPT, I just want to have a day when there are fewer meetings, not no meetings.
I think I want to go and work for her.
Digital twins promise enormous impact, like to society, to everything, to the whole world. How do you balance the excitement of such an exciting future with the gritty day-to-day?
In everything I've done in my life, I needed a bigger goal, because that keeps you, when I was in CSIRO before that keeps, that keeps me grounded and also balanced, because every day will bring you a new set of challenges that may seem menial. You have to go through process, you have to get approvals, whatever it is in every single working life, right, day. So having a bigger goal and understanding that, well, you're part of something bigger than yourself, it helps me go through that everyday nitty-gritty. But at the same time, you have to be practical. You can't just tell the team, oh, we're going to solve the problems of the world every day. No, you actually have to go into the planning and, okay, we have these tickets to work on now. Like, it gets real, but that's part of a bigger vision. And obviously, you have to remind everyone and remind ourselves why we're doing it, but you have to be practical and not delusional.
Ana, what's the thing you'd love someone to ask you to make a digital twin of?
A project.
Yeah.
In Australia.
No, anywhere in the world?
No. I'm a project in Australia.
Yeah.
That requires an infrastructure project that requires, engagement and stakeholders and approvals from 3 levels of government. Something like a bullet train project. Something major that we haven't done in many. I've migrated to Australia 15 years ago. I want to see a proud Australian project, big one, right? I want to see something big, like an opera house, or Olympics are coming, but something bigger, something that makes us as a nation proud and remind us that we are makers, we are builders. And I haven't seen one that, since I came here, I haven't seen one of that magnitude. And when you have like a major project that involves so many levels of government, you know how it is. I don't need to explain. So I want us to contribute through what we do, what we know of Australian data and geospatial and all of that, to solving some of these coordination problems that sometimes just put brakes on projects like that. And I want to see one. I want to see the bullet train,
Well, as someone who's done political journalism for 3 decades, I can tell you this has been going on for 50 years, the bullet train thing. To me, in terms of the money they've spent on consultancy, the geospatial digital twin thing could be the most extraordinary solution to figuring out whether we can make it work or not, if it's possible.
Yeah. I don't think a digital twin or any technology can solve all the problems in the world, but I want, through what we do, contribute to such a vision.
I think we spent enough on consultancy reports, though, that we probably could have built one by now. But anyway, your last one?
What's one mistake you made in your early founder days that has formed a really important part of your lessons, particularly
Hiring
as a
the
leader?
wrong people.
Sorry?
Hiring the wrong people.
Yeah.
That was short and sweet.
That was good. Any expanding to that point? How do you know you've hired the wrong person?
I've been involved in recruitment for even when I was in CSIRO and before that for many, many years. And I think I have a pretty good judgment and experience, but I've been surprised. And I made the wrong call, and I worked on fixing it, because at the end of the day, the bucket stops with me. And if I made the wrong call, or if I have had a gut feel that it wasn't the right decision, I had to fix it, recognize my mistake, and move on to fixing it.
So tell me, given you're in science, what was your eureka moment?
So first of all, I worked amongst scientists. I'm not a science person.
But it rubs off.
Yes. We worked in engineering, and I'm very focused on product, to be honest. That's my passion. And starting up the company. But there were many moments in my, I'm not sure if it's relevant to your question, but there are many moments in my tenure in CSIRO when it was very, very, very difficult, and I wanted to walk away. But unexpectedly, because we work in open source and because the users of the platforms we developed at that time, like National Map, were sending us messages. The messages of how great what we've built was for them kept me going, and also made me understand that we were on to something that actually solves a problem for people. At that time, it was bringing thousands of geospatial data sets into one platform and people were not wasting their time trying to figure out each website and government website, trying to find data sets and so on. That was a problem that we were solving, and they were so grateful for it. And that kept me, come on, we are on to something here. We can build something out of this. So yeah, it wasn't like an eureka moment, but it was meaningful to me to keep me going.
I just reckon it's that moment of excitement and joy, and it sounds like you've had plenty of those. I hope you have lots more, Anna. Thank you for joining us from Terria.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, I was so inspired by Tech23 this week. I know they do it every year, and congrats to Ingrid and to Shan and the entire team there, who are probably exhausted after that, but it was an epic day of brilliant ideas. I hope we get more of those founders along. A couple of them, of course, we'll get to meet in a couple of weeks at the Startup Daily Best in Tech Awards. Our judges singled them out already, so how clever are they?
That's great. Honestly, I have major FOMO not being at Tech23.
Well, that is the end of Startup 360 for this week. This, of course, is a Smart Co media production, produced and edited by the wonderful Mikey. Thanks to Ella, to Matt, to James, to Vanda for their support. Don't forget, you can follow the show on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. Get those little notifications. Your phone pings every week. It's very exciting when we go live on a Friday. Of course, don't forget to read startupdaily.net. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next Friday. Bye for now.